At the end of the universe lies the beginning of Inglorious Trexperts.
This episode is brought to you by Milliways. If you've done 6 impossible things this morning, why not round it off with breakfast at Milliways?
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are, if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw and get reacquainted with some old classics. So, join us now for the 4:30 movie.
Welcome to Post-Apocalypse Movie Week on the 4:30 movie. This is Mark A. Altman, and I'm here with our usual band of expert programmers. We're all experting. And, they're here to disseminate fascinating tidbits of information about your favorite movies. I have writer-producer Steve Melching here.
Hello.
Alongside concept designer Darren Doctorman.
Hi.
And returning champ, film and TV writer, Mr. Ashley E. Miller.
Hola.
How much money did you win last week?
All of it.
And this week, we're very happy to be joined by a special guest for Post-Apocalypse Week. It is the showrunner for USA's Colony. He also has written a number of popular feature films. And,
feature films.
Feature films. It's Ryan Condell. Welcome to the show,
Hello,
Ryan.
Hello. Very good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome, and it's a great week to have you because, of course, we're talking about post-apocalyptic movies, and I believe at one point you did some work on the Logan's Run screenplay.
I did. One of many since 1996 when good man Joel Silver started trying to make that movie over at Warner Brothers, and so it continues.
You would think by now, it would be. I mean, it's such a beloved anti-classic.
Maybe it just shouldn't be remade.
Maybe.
It's
Maybe
coming to that possibility.
Yeah.
The ironic thing is, if the remake was in the Logan's Run world, it would have been killed.
Your screenplay has turned black.
Yeah, it's blinking red.
It has submitted itself for renewal.
Renew.
Well, as we know, there is no sanctuary.
It's option time. Renew.
There is no sanctuary from our bad puns. We are here to talk about post-apocalyptic movies, and as we do every week, each of our expert programmers will suggest a movie for a different day of the week. And these are post-apocalypse movies, which is a pretty large dystopian genre of science fiction, but a popular one, surprisingly. And we're going to start as
Apocalypse Now would not be one of them because
Ironically.
the apocalypse is now.
That's
But
right.
It has to be
apocalypse
Still
later.
after
Right.
it.
The
Exactly.
apocalypse has to be later.
Right.
So,
Got it.
if the apocalypse is happening
That's
now.
post-apocalypse
Now.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's why the Trump White House would not be eligible for this because it's an apocalypse happening now. We're looking at apocalypses happening later.
But we're not political.
So, everyone.
There are
should be
fine people on
political.
both sides.
Yeah, are there? Not after watching the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Okay, so Steve Melching, as always, starts us off for Monday. What do you think?
Well, I've been last few episodes I've been doing some kind of deep cuts to lead us off. So this week I'm going to kind of go for the low-hanging fruit and go after a film that is probably was served as my introduction to the post-apocalyptic genre and remains possibly my favorite example of the genre, and that's George Miller's The Road Warrior, a.k.a. Mad Max 2. This is a film, obviously, it was a sequel to Mad Max, but in this film, there's not even a vestige of civilization left. He's out in the wasteland with his dog and his interceptor, and starring Mel Gibson, of course, and coming across a group of survivors that lives in a gas refinery and dreaming of finding a lush haven for themselves away from the bands of marauders that are relentlessly attacking them and trying to take everything they have. I mean, this movie is absolutely iconic, and I would say this is the film that really spawned the sequels. I don't think Mad Max got much attention when it was released here initially, the first Mad Max film. But this film, I think, made an impact and led directly to Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and of course Fury Road in recent years, which is also, I think, a masterpiece of post-apocalyptic filmmaking. George Miller just creates this incredible post-apocalyptic vision of these warriors of the wasteland that have this patchwork armor and these vehicles, this whole economy based on fuel, and it's incredibly violent. It's got terrific action set pieces. It's got great characters. I mean, the leader. Everyone's seen this film, so I'm just reiterating what we all love about it. The Lord Humongous, this huge brawny muscle man in a metal hockey mask and leather shorts. I mean, that's amazing. And Vernon Wells as Wes, with his feathers and his houseboy and his motorcycle, and
The feral kid.
the feral child, yes,
Been resurrected as an internet meme now. He's in a second life.
with his sharpened boomerang.
Yes.
I mean, it's just an incredibly inventive film, and I mean, I could almost nominate Fury Road as maybe the best example. Fury Road, I didn't think anyone could top The Road Warrior. I didn't think it could be topped, and somehow Fury Road did. But I'm going to stick with The Road Warrior because it was first and so iconic.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to say something sacrilegious. I'm not a huge fan of the Mad Max films, but I love Fury Road. But I think you're right to nominate Road Warrior. That is really the film that sort of defined that franchise. I personally like Fury Road a lot more, but I think that's a good choice. I mean, clearly you can't have a post-apocalypse week without George Miller and the Mad Max films.
Yeah, it's a subgenre.
Yeah.
Mad Max something is like a subgenre, and I mean that's always
It's
that kind of
imitated,
branding.
so often imitated. It's
That's
one of
right.
those films like Die Hard that is so iconic and just becomes so imitated both in its look and in its structure and the types of action set pieces it does. Fury Road somehow took it to the next level with its absolutely stunning cinematography, and it was just so relentlessly inventive, that film. Like, all the different factions looked so different. The action scenes were incredible in that movie. I can't believe this is coming from a director who's, in his 70s?
Yeah. It's
George
remarkable.
Miller is just a terrific director of all kinds of genres.
Old people are surprising.
Yeah.
It's also sorry, go ahead.
That's good. The Road Warrior is really the urtext of these sorts of movies. You can't even begin to talk about them unless you talk about The Road Warrior. And I think there's nobody more perfect than George Miller to kind of take what he had done and expand on that just in terms of the design, expand on that thematically, but without truly changing his own filmmaking techniques other than how they evolved over the years. He didn't suddenly go, you know what, we're just going to do everything in CGI. Like,
No.
they spent a long time shooting stuff like out in the desert on Fury Road. It was a grueling shoot. I think it took 30 years.
Well, they
but-
were planning to shoot this film before 9/11,
Right.
and then 9/11 happened, and their locations proved just to be too dangerous. They couldn't shoot; they were too afraid to shoot in Africa, and the whole thing kind of fell apart. And I remember being really disappointed 'cause I was so excited.
Well, that's
to
when
see a
Mel
new
Gibson
entry.
was going to star. in it.
Yeah, I was so excited to see a new entry in this series, and then it got delayed in 16 years. Totally worth it, though,
Right.
somehow.
But
It
even
was
when they started
incredible.
rolling camera, I mean, it took a long time to make that film. I think you're right to pick Road Warrior over Fury Road, even though I love Fury Road. Although I think so. Here's the, and I'm saying this as somebody who loves the movie. Okay, I mean, it's basically a movie about a really long U-turn. But but the Road Warrior, I mean.
Well, it's a multi-point turn. I mean,
Yeah, totally. You have to kind of go.
More like a
it's like
K-turn.
3 points.
Because the U-turn would be illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got and Mad Max is a cop, and that's awkward. The thing that's great
abuse
about
of power.
yeah,
Totally what the movie's about.
you can't really do Fury Road without the Road Warrior to define that aesthetic. And the thing about the aesthetic that he defines is it's not arbitrary. A lot of people tried to imitate it, but what they didn't get was that Miller wasn't just creating these visuals for the sake of the visuals. He was building a world right down to the goddamn dental work on some of these characters. It all felt like a world that we could recognize as tangible and real. And what I love about this movie, other than, again, I was fortunate enough to watch it at the ArcLight several weeks ago on the big screen again, and it just looked amazing and beautiful. Aside from the fact that Mel Gibson owns this film with something like 12 lines of dialogue, one of which is like, oh, I can drive that truck, is that the story, simple as it actually is actually really good. And the storytelling is great. It's not just that the action sequences as action sequences are incredibly well executed. It is that they tell a great story so that when you get to the punchline, when you realize that you are essentially in this post-apocalyptic great train robbery, and like you open up that truck and you realize what's inside of it and what Mad Max, the guy who, he doesn't stick his neck out for anybody, totally different film, but you know what I'm talking about, like what he's done for these people, it's kind of moving. And it represents an evolution of this character who, if you watch him in the context of having watched Mad Max, which I think certainly shows its position kind of in Miller's filmography as to when he made that film, the kind of filmmaker he was, but had brilliant things about it, especially the ending. But when you look at it in the context of that character and the journey he's been through, when we see him in Mad Max losing his family, the way that he does, that he goes from being a guy who is trying to maintain order in this incredibly screwed up world, discovers that that's impossible,
like he's
succumbs
right on
to
the
madness.
border in that film. He's like,
And then he crosses it. And then when he finds these people, it is really about him reconnecting with the person who could have been a cop in a previous life, could have been a public servant, had a family, was a father. And I think that's why it's powerful and that's why it works. He's a little bit of a guest star in Fury Road, and he's a great guest star, and it's Tom Hardy, and he's awesome, and he does an amazing Mel Gibson imitation without feeling like he's doing a Mel Gibson imitation. But The Road Warrior, I think, is kind of a perfect sequel for all of those reasons.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, it really is one of those seminal films of 1982 that we talk about so often, Road Warrior, in the sense that, it really changed the way we understand genre storytelling and, rests alongside films like Conan and Star Trek II and Tron, which were really the beginning of a certain type of genre picture that, clearly resonated with us and so many other people. So it's another reason why I think Road Warrior is probably, the signature iconic film of the franchise, even though I personally prefer Fury Road.
I'm kind of remaining a little bit quiet on this because I frankly am not a fan of any of the films. And my personal opinion is that I think that they are, even though the story is well told, I think it is the harbinger of bad movies to come in terms of, explosions over content, action over, interesting characters. I think that the wrong things were taken from the lesson of Road Warrior and brought here now into our present day. And that's sort of my feeling about it. I mean, other than that, it's fine. But
they're sort of like post-apocalyptic westerns, which is something that I do like about them.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it sort of said, if you throw a Tina Turner song at something, you can make it better. So,
well, as with anything,
right? Yeah. Especially if it's a movie about Tina Turner.
And Beyond Thunderdome is another one of those movies where it's completely schizophrenic, like where the first half is really good and then it's just a dud after that.
And there aren't many other movies that you get to hear the word gasoline.
Yes, that's true. So Monday, Road Warrior. Tuesday, Mr. Ryan Condell, special
I
guest.
get to come in. I was thinking you guys would give me Friday or Saturday or something in this.
Well, Saturday we'll be home. We'll be home watching The Love Boat. But I can give you, if you want, we can wait till Friday for you. We can bring you in for Friday.
I will take it. I will take it. I might get yelled at over this and thrown off the podcast, but I haven't.
We're too tired to
prepared defense.
Or throw it.
And you didn't say "Hail to the Chiefs."
I did not yet. So another film from 1982, and my personal favorite film, Blade Runner.
Okay.
Which I think not it is a post-apocalyptic movie because not all apocalypses end in tribal warfare in the desert. This was a world that Ridley Scott crafted that was seen as the end of something. The animals don't exist anymore in this world. They're made artificially. There's the Vangelis' great score. There's a track on the score, Memories of Green, because people don't even remember what the color green looks like. I mean, that sounds like a post-apocalypse to me. Yeah, but in a way, coming off of The Road Warrior, and certainly these films were made in parallel, so there was no way for one to be referencing the other. It's just such a different look at what the actual apocalypse will most likely look like. I mean, Road Warrior happened at a time when it was the height of the Cold War panic, and certainly that was even though they never say it, it was a post-nuclear wasteland. But I think Blade Runner, does many things it does incredibly well. Is it speaks to a more realistic future, one that we see ourselves.
Well.
We see ourselves.
It's the future of man and winding up with a whimper, not a bang.
Exactly. Not ending in a nuclear blast, but ending at the end of a long illness.
Now, here's the question for you. So if we're going to show Blade Runner on Tuesday, which version of Blade Runner are we showing?
Well, if we're showing it back in the day, I think there's only one version to show, which is the theatrical cut. But I mean, my preferred I will just say very honestly, my preferred version is the final cut. I feel like that is probably the version that Ridley did intend, unlike the special editions, which we could do a whole, angry podcast on. I think it really is the version that Ridley intended in 1982, and without all the studio interference and lack of ability to finish the film and budget issues that, other than I think Zora going through the plate glass and having her head, CG replaced, the storytelling, the narrative of that film is what Ridley intended. So I would say either that or the director's cut. Certainly no goddamn voiceover.
No cold sushi. That's what my ex-wife used to call me.
Exactly.
Okay. So my and I would just point out to the viewers, if you are going to seek this out, of course, the brilliant Blu-ray edition by Charlie de Lauzirika is an extraordinary. It is probably the great DVD Blu-ray set ever produced.
And the 4K, I have to say, that film in 4K looks just
stunning.
Yeah, stunning.
But there's also one of my favorite special features of all time, not just the Dangerous Days documentary, but the way that Charlie took the outtakes and alternate takes and constructed sort of this faux linear narrative using discarded voiceover, using discarded scenes, alternate takes. So rather than sitting and just toggling through, alternate take here, a deleted scene, he constructs sort of this 40-minute or 45-minute version of Blade Runner with outtakes, and it's just fascinating to watch. And it's a hoot because some of the Harrison Ford narration, is just dreadful, and it's wildly entertaining.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper.
Yeah.
Well, unless it's they do.
Unless you're in newspaper advertising.
So I'll differ a little bit with my good friend Ryan in the sense that, look, I agree the final cut is the best version. However, I don't think that we would really be having any conversations about Blade Runner whatsoever if the original version with the voiceover had not existed. Because we all come to that movie having seen that version, having heard everybody talk about the goddamn movie, so that we suddenly have this context that makes the movie make sense. And I think the final cut is this beautiful, it's a dream, and it sounds great, and it looks amazing, and Harrison Ford is he's Harrison Ford. He's perfect in every way. He's not bad in anything. I mean, think of it. Has Harrison Ford ever been bad in anything?
Yes.
Hollywood Homicide.
Okay, fine, smart guy.
The Force Awakens.
So, point being that yes, I agree that the voiceover version is vastly inferior to the final cut, but I feel like it's kind of the gateway drug to the final cut.
A necessary step in the process.
So it's like if you're new to it, I would say watch the theatrical cut. If you've never seen it before, absolutely watch final.
I see. I have to disagree even more. I really like the theatrical cut. That's the version that I fell in love with. I saw it in the theater in the summer of '82. I joined the Blade Runner fan club that summer. I still have my fan club kit that has my spinner operator permit and my replicant detector card and all that stuff.
That's awesome.
And I totally agree with what you were saying, that film with the narration, as sort of goofy as it can be at times, provides that critical context that modern viewers bring to the film just as a given. I loved seeing the different versions of the film as they were coming out. I remember going to see the work print at the Newark, and having my mind blown. And I remember the.
But did you think it was a better movie then when you saw that? Did you prefer?
I loved seeing it, and probably in that moment,
I loved it with the Planet of the Apes score.
Well, yeah, I think because I was such a massive fan of Blade Runner, I loved seeing that new cut, and I did think it was better. And then I saw the next cut, and then finally the final cut, and I really love the final cut. But I find myself now going back to the release cut and watching the release cut.
It's really
interesting.
interesting.
I think the thing that I think about the release cut is that no matter what you think about the voiceover, it gives it the lineage of a noir detective movie.
Mm-hmm.
That is its connection to what we may have been used to earlier from previous movies that we've seen, right? And I think that is an essential thing to understand the movie. Not only for him explaining things going on, but understand what the whole mindset of the movie is. And it's this genre taken out and put in a different setting.
Well, it's so interesting you said that, because I was going to say something very similar. To me, when you saw it in 1982, that's exactly, before all this baggage came, masterpiece, science fiction classic. It was sci-fi noir.
Right.
It was a flop.
He
very
was
quickly
a
forgotten
detective
in
on a
82.
case
Yeah.
in the future. So the idea of the narration seemed perfectly logical. And in fact, we make fun of the narration because he's sleepwalking through it. But there's some really great narration in there as well as the goofy lines. And I mean, I'm in a minority. I think I'm one of 6 people who like Altered Carbon on Netflix, and which is also because I like it because it's sci-fi noir. It's pulpy sci-fi noir. And I think if you divest Blade Runner from the legend of Blade Runner, as sci-fi noir, the theatrical cut is wildly entertaining. Do I think the final cut is better? Probably. Is that the version we should show? Probably, but I do feel defensive about the theatrical cut because there's a lot I really love.
And I love
about
watching the final cut and hearing the atmospherics that are covered by the narration. I love hearing
that's the thing.
The ambient sound and the music.
Sound of the street.
Yeah, I love that. I loved hearing that the first time and I still love hearing it.
Yeah, to me, the movie. I've always said the movie is it's 3-dimensional poetry, and that's not meant to sound as pretentious as it does admittedly sound.
If you had made it, it would be pretentious. As a viewer saying that, it's
that's
not
right.
pretentious.
I like that. But for me, I came to it later in life. So actually, my first experience with the movie was the director's cut when everybody was raving about it, because I was in high school at the time, and I was a big Harrison Ford fan. Of course, grew up on Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Knew the Blade Runner existed, but didn't really know what it was all about. So my entree into that was the director's cut. And imagine seeing that for the first time without the narration to kind of handhold you through it. So I knew I loved that movie before I was able to actually love that movie. I mean, I had a similar experience in reading Dune when I was a kid. I mean, it was my dad's favorite book, and I read Dune probably when I was 10 years old. And I mean, it was just, mind-blowing. But I didn't understand anything that I was reading because I didn't have the adult context to put a lot of those references that Herbert was making into the movie. But for me, Blade Runner is this... it's this gift that every time you go back to it, you get to unwrap new layers of it, and you find things in the music. I mean, even there's this tremendous, I forget who it was, probably Varis Sarabanda or however you pronounce that, the 30-track long 3-disc Blade Runner, all this extended score. There's all this score that's not in the movie. There are secrets in that movie that were revealed in the titles of these tracks that were never actually in the movie. Just these things that you're able to pull out of it and withdraw and extract. And I mean that to me, the rarity of a movie, especially nowadays. And we were talking about Fury Road the last time around. One of the recent genre movies where I felt like if you could watch that movie 10 times and it would reward you every time, and you get to go back and pull new things out of it. It's so rare to find a movie nowadays when they're just made as this disposable entertainment where you can really just live in that world and take new things from it every time. And that's really why it certainly wasn't my favorite movie when I was 16 years old, but it's become that over time because it's just the thing that I find myself revisiting most often out of all these movies.
I remember being so excited when the real Vangelis score finally came out because I love the New American Orchestra version. I played
Which is
it
more
constantly.
symphonic and has the orchestrations.
Yeah,
it's
and
really
I played
great.
it in my car. I had a tape of it in my car that I played all the time, and I still love it. I still love listening to it, but it was so exciting to get the true score to that film, which is brilliant also.
Yeah, the first
I'm
time
really glad that the film has finally been recognized because it was kind of forgotten in '82.
It's
I loved
AFI
it.
Top 100 now.
Yeah.
And we'll only move up the list.
But
I think,
it
as
came
the years
out
go
in
on.
that super crowded summer of '82.
Yeah.
That it was very easy to get lost, and especially Harrison Ford is coming directly off Raiders of the Lost Ark and Empire Strikes Back.
I remember when
right.
it came out on VHS, I was so excited because that's the forgotten cut. It was Blade Runner with additional gore, unseen in
right.
theaters.
Right.
And it was when he
eyeballs.
the eyeballs, and that was added for home video, and that was like, oh wow, cool,
and the fingers in the nostrils.
Yeah. And so that was actually, and then there was the New York cut, which was the work print, which had the Planet of the Apes score and had a bunch of other things.
The titles.
And then the official director's cut, and then of course the final cut. Any version you watch, you're going to be rewarded. They're all great, but it's Ryan's pick, so it'll be Blade Runner: The Final Cut on
Tuesday.
Oh, that's me. On that's not my phone ringing. You're not Blade Runner. You're not Replicant. It's the Voight-Kampff test. I am going to turn to Darren for Wednesday for his Wednesday choice.
Wednesday. Well, I guess an apocalypse depends on which side of it you're on, whether or not it's the end of your world or the beginning of another. So my little sojourn is to right here, The Planet of the Apes.
Ah,
Love it.
From 1968. It's the end of one world, the beginning of another. It's, obviously it's a classic. Charlton Heston at his most scene-chewing. Amazing makeup effects. And it just shows you that gorillas and chimpanzees and orangutans can't get along together very well. They stay on their own lunch tables. It has become so referenced and so iconic that you almost forget what an amazing moment it is in time and in movie making. The one cut where we hear the horn call out when they're in the middle of the cornfield, and you cut to the gorilla on horseback, you're going, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Shocking.
And I got to see it last year in a theater. I guess they did a special screening of it, and it's just amazing. Again, Franklin Schaffner, an amazing director at the height of his power. It's just an amazing, again, Jerry Goldsmith score, and not only deep meaning in terms of things happening in society and how we relate to each other, but also obviously the cautionary tale of what may lie in store for us, and don't don't protect apes.
Yeah.
I think
Never
that's
trust
what
a
that.
monkey.
And you know, social commentary of the time. Don't trust anyone over 21. But I mean, which
And
is a little
definitely
dated.
trust Charleston Heston.
But
for sure.
with a gun.
For sure.
But there's so much that's relevant about the stratification of ape society and the way that the segregation of humans, and it really is super relevant, and it's really sad for me to see, because I do like the new Planet of the Apes movies quite a bit.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
But what I don't like is the way that the original has been marginalized to an extent, because younger audience seem to only want to watch with the fancy CGI and the current iteration.
And it seems to me that a lot of the deeper meaning is gone. It only has meaning in terms of what the characters are doing. It has no sort of symbolic meaning at all.
I don't know if that's
at least for
completely
me.
true. Sure. I mean, but I think that it's become its own thing. It's taken on a
Absolutely.
meaning
Yeah.
of its own.
But I miss having, I was shocked that Planet of the Apes for the anniversary last year didn't come out on 4K, because it's a stunning looking film that would look gorgeous on 4K, and the fact that it hasn't been released on 4K is kind of a travesty. It's funny because you said Planet of the Apes. I was actually going to nominate. Now I'm not Beneath the Planet of the Apes, because that to me is more of a post-apocalyptic film in the sense of the mutants and the bomb and the destruction of the Earth at the end. That really seems to hammer home a post-apocalyptic film.
That's current apocalypse.
Well, and let's consider for a moment that people a lot of people forget that it wasn't Star Wars that invented the modern science fiction franchise. Right. Planet of the Apes spawned not only 4 film sequels, but a
TV
television series,
an animated
series,
and merchandise,
a toy line with action figures. It was, it's
a great point.
As a kid growing up in the 70s. These films were on television all the time. The TV show was on. The toys. I mean, it was very popular.
It was
You have to wonder.
Yeah.
You have to wonder if Star Wars even exists without it.
Yeah.
Because certainly that was in Lucas's in the taproot cycle of the
more
things that led him
importantly
to
than that, it was in Alan Ladd's at
Sure.
Fox.
Right.
Would he have greenlit Star Wars at Fox without
The
them
success.
having made all this money
Yeah.
off of Planet of the Apes? I don't know if they would have. I don't think he would have been able to greenlight it. But I will say that yes, this all takes us back to the beginning of the 4:30 movie, because I think what inspired this podcast and what probably we remember the most fondly about the 4:30 movie, of course, is Planet of the Apes week, where they would show Planet of the Apes over 2 days and repeat the 20 minutes on the second day to get it to fit the 2 time slots. So Planet of the Apes is kind of a seminal movie in 4:30 movie history in our childhood, certainly. But
and that's how you guys are probably first exposed to it, right?
Exactly.
Oh yeah, on television. Absolutely.
Like for me, and I'm probably the baby of this.
You're the baby.
In more ways than one.
But my whole experience of Planet of the Apes
Well, the
was
crying.
it was 100%. And also I poop myself occasionally. But
has been
thank
a long
God
day.
you guys cleaned it up. It's a very long day. No, I responded to different things in those movies, and for me, the sort of the keystone moment for Planet of the Apes, the thing that kind of kept bringing me back to it and anchored me to it. It wasn't in Planet of the Apes. Was it Conquest when they go back in time to New York?
That's Escape.
That's Escape? Okay, so it's Escape. An escape from Planet of the Apes. Escape from the Planet of the Apes. The end of that movie where they throw the baby into the river. Mm-hmm. That's one of those images in film that just stays with me. And I remember seeing that as a child and not really understanding the symbolism of that at all. But I did understand the emotional symbolism of that. I did understand what it was like, for this mother to do that. And it gave those movies a certain emotional reality that changed them for me. Like once I saw that, I watched the other movies differently as a child. Because I wondered about that. I wondered about that baby. That's what stuck in my head. And I think what's great about the Planet of the Apes series is that this is almost too facile to say, but it humanizes the apes.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, it introduces them as aliens. as complete other, right? And it's not saying at the very beginning of Planet of the Apes, oh, well, we're on Earth and they're just apes and they've taken over. It's no, you don't find out until you find the goddamn Statue of Liberty. Spoiler alert.
What?
P.S. right?
damn it.
Even
And
though
so-
Fox put the
cover
damn,
of the
on the
video in
box.
the 90s.
Oh, totally.
Brilliant.
But by the end of that,
And
that
you ruined the
series
ending of
movies-
Spaceballs too.
Thank
while
you.
you're at it.
But you do understand them as something that they're like us. I mean, there's just something incredibly.
Well, they're more
powerful
human
about it.
than the humans in the movie.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Taylor has lost all his will and lost all his compassion, and he has been hardened into this jerk.
Yeah.
But that's such a great point because it's such a darkly nihilistic franchise. Could you imagine it being maintained? First of all, Charlton Heston is your lead, who is a complete self-involved narcissist who hates
Misanthrope.
other people.
Yeah.
He's a misanthrope. He hates people. He's on this adventure not for one giant leap for mankind,
Yeah.
because he wants to get away from people.
Yeah.
You have a 40-minute
That's
hiking
Rod Serling.
scene through the freaking a forbidden zone where nothing happens other than score and people barely talk to each other. And every movie series is completely dark. We talked about the first one, the Statue of Liberty reveal. Could you imagine? That's not something you come out to feel good movie of the year. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, they blow up the Earth, right? in Escape, they throw the baby out with the bathwater, and Conquest is a race riot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like this is a franchise in the 60s and 70s. It's crazy that this thing became what, and then it was ultimately considered a show for children, because when CBS aired the short-lived TV show, it was Friday nights because it was considered a kids show, and then of course they edited those into a series of TV movies that became Life, Liberty, and Pursuit on the Planet of the Apes, and the best thing about them were the titles.
Right.
Well, and the movie rescued all those Iranian hostages, as we learned from Argo.
That's right. Battle for the Planet of the Apes inspired the Argo mission in Argo.
Exactly. I mean, that to me is the fascinating thing about the tone of that movie, is that it was considered sort of broadly appealing entertainment for children at the time, but it was so deep in its themes and its relevance to what was going on. I mean, you think of when it was released, 1968. I mean, that was basically the eve of the apocalypse in America. If you think about what was going on, it was also that's a major year in real film history in terms of the turnover from the films that came before 1968 and then the films that would come in the 1970s. And Planet of the Apes, the whole series is very much, but that first movie is very much a 1970s movie made way ahead of its time. So if you consider that fact, that it really is a mid-70s movie made in 1968, plus it's science fiction, visionary science fiction. I mean, the only other thing on the map that's anything like it is 2001, which came out the same year. Right. Just rescuing science fiction from the dumpster of what was being released in the 1950s. That and 2001 are the most important films
and yet,
for that.
It's rated G.
Which I love, yeah.
It has nudity. It has violence.
Just like Moana.
I mean, it's really remarkable. But it's so funny. I mean, and it just stands the test of time for me. I mean, on the high holidays they blow the shofar, in synagogue. All I can think about is Planet of the Apes when I hear that. And that's it says more about me than anything else. But it's such a great. I mean, that reveal, as you talked about, of the apes, but also, of course, the scene where Taylor is caught in the nets when he tries to escape Ape City. Shot at the Malibu Ranch, Fox Malibu Ranch, and the Jerry Goldsmith chase music, which is so one of the great pieces of music ever written for a movie, and culminating with him finally getting his voice back and say, "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes." It's not just great science fiction. This is just a legendary
storytelling.
scene.
Yeah,
it's storytelling of the highest order. And again, it goes back to we've talked about Franklin Schaffner being an underrated director. Look at the way that movie is shot. It's so stylishly shot, and he's another guy who was able to be so facile, who moved from genre to genre. So he never really got the kind of reputation of a Hitchcock or these guys who sort of stayed in their own lane.
Right.
And it's a shame because, Patton and Planet of the Apes, I mean, are just two true masterpieces.
So there we go. Wednesday.
So Thursday, Ashley Miller.
Okay. So the movie I'm proposing for Thursday is falls under the heading of films that were discoveries for me, i.e. Movies that I had no expectation of going in, or if I had an expectation at all, it was somewhat negative. And then while in the theater, the experience of it just kicked me in the ass, and then kicked me in the ass again, and then kicked me in the ass so hard I threw up the boot tip. And
So the movie is Ass Kickers of 1938.
Ass Kickers and Ass Kicked Again. That was the sequel. No, and I had good reason to be suspicious of this film because the lead was an actor in whom I had very little to no faith whatsoever. I associated him with kind of messing up another great movie. And a role that he played in a very simple comedy that I loved, but seemed somehow worlds away from this film. I could not understand how Keanu Reeves was going to carry this crazy, what looked like a martial arts movie with lots of shooting and science fiction, and all of which I loved, all of which was in my wheelhouse. But I kind of didn't get it. But sitting in the theater and watching The Matrix for the first time, God, I wish I could go back and visit myself, like fucking Scott Bakula. Like, I go back and visit myself in time and experiencing that movie for the first time again. Because from the very first frame, you know that you are in such expert hands that the storytelling is so assured and it's so interesting and there's suspense and there's real tension. When the phone starts ringing when he's at work, right? How threatening is Agent Smith? It's like, I see two people here. It's just, that's all fantastic. And when it gets to the big reveal, it blows your mind. And at that point in time, you have no idea how badly they're going to fuck it up in the next two films. But for that beautiful moment in time, you are watching this amazing action film that does things that you have not seen. And for me, I was a big fan of Hong Kong cinema, right? I loved John Woo before anybody knew who the hell John Woo was. And to see that sort of action being brought to the big screen in America and being done so well, and Lawrence Fishburne is amazing. The casting is just amazing. The science fiction is great. Every part of it is interesting. And it ends just so perfectly. And the great thing about it is you don't realize until you get to that last little scene, that denouement, what the Wachowskis have done. They've essentially, and then they blow it, but they've essentially set up a perfect excuse for a superhero movie. They've created a superhero. And it just leaves you, it as they say, you leave them wanting more. It leaves you wanting more. And you know what? God damn it. I still want more. I love The Matrix. I think it's, and certainly we're putting together what I think is a very amazing week. And I think The Matrix certainly stands with that.
I had the same experience as you. I went into The Matrix with very low expectations. I had memories of Johnny Mnemonic dancing through my head. The last Keanu Reeves cyberpunk film that had come out the year prior, I think.
Yes,
and I went to an early screening of it at the Warner Brothers lot at the then brand new Stephen Ross Theater, which is a gorgeous theater. And we were just joking around like, this movie's going to be terrible, right? And the movie
I think we saw it together because I know I saw it with Rob Burnett. The
yeah, we probably were together.
And we were all very dubious, and we all came out completely...
I knew within 10 or 15 minutes, I remember thinking, I can't wait to own this on Blu-ray.
Right. Well, DVD.
I'm DVD. I can't wait to get the DVD of this.
I can't wait until they invent the next technology.
Wow, I can't wait.
It'll
It
be
streams
ultra
on
high
Netflix. What are you talking
What's a stream?
Yeah, this is. I wish I thought the same thing. This is one of those rare experiences that you wish you could go back and experience again because it was so much fun to discover the movie fresh.
Because it was unlike anything else you had ever seen,
Yes.
but then so much like what you had seen. You said, the John Woo films like Hard Boiled and The Killer were being discovered in the 90s, and this took sort of that Hong Kong chopsaki and married it to cyberpunk and married it to all these kind of genres and just did it so well and with such a sense of style, because I had just a couple years earlier seen the Wachowskis' Bound, which was a visual tour de force, which I loved. This great film noir with Meg Tilly and Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon, and I said, these guys to watch. And then, so when The Matrix came out, I was excited because of them, but I had the same, it's Johnny Mnemonic, what the hell? And we came out of that mesmerized and enraptured by this movie and how it pushed the boundaries of the genre. And as you said about, it seemed like it was teeing up a superhero franchise, which is a direction it completely. Every time it tapped into something interesting in the sequels, like the scene where they talk to Lambert Wilson. And you get, this is where werewolves and Dracula and all this stuff came from previous iterations of The Matrix when it was less advanced. It's like, this is going in a really interesting direction, and just completely dropped.
Yeah, I saw same experience, I think, as Ashley, and great poll too. I mean, I commending the panel on, and not to reduce for Steve's pick for Road Warrior,
Bob
but
Roberts?
you're expecting a week of Road Warrior films. And I think you need to have Road Warrior on the list, but like this is really good. I like the interesting ways that we're looking at the idea of a post-apocalypse. Right, it's not all tribal wars in the desert. But I saw this movie in college, and I loved movies. I went multiple times a week, and it was I can think of like 3 or 4 experiences where I sat in the movie theater and I was just blown out of my seat. And this I think was the first time it wasn't just visuals or love of and all those things were there, loving what I'm seeing, but just really being unseated with the reveal about what's actually going on here, and having your mind blown and asking these questions about. So I was in I guess sophomore philosophy at the time, and it's basically philosophy 101, intro to philosophy. So I saw this thing on Thursday night or whenever the first time you could see it, and I had class the next day, and I went into my professor and I said, we were studying my annual Kant at the time, which is basically what is real, I think therefore I am.
Right.
And I went in and I said to him, I was like, I just saw a movie last night that is this whole thing that you're teaching. It's done in this movie, but it's science fiction. As I just breathlessly pitched this thing to him, and he goes, "Kid, every time I teach Kant, everybody comes in here and tells me that the movie they just saw, they see it. It's like, it's great that you're thinking that way. You got to expand your mind, open your mind. Just but it's." Trust me, let the adults drive the bus, and that was sort of the last whatever I thought of it. I took the class, did well in the class, whatever. To that guy's credit, I forget the teacher's name. Ran into him on campus 2 years later as a senior, and he stopped me on campus and he said, "I'm so sorry." He's like, "I never told you," because he didn't go see it right away and whatever, but he went to see the movie, and he's like, "I have taught The Matrix to every class that I've had since then in philosophy when I'm teaching Kant, because it's such a great way to help them visualize the layered thinking that this guy is going through. Well, I pick up this glass, but how do I know the glass is real? And if I'm real, and if I'm touching it and I feel it, but this could all just be a simulation." So he basically thanked me and said that, I had saved his philosophy career. Or at least that's the thing that I put in my head.
That's a great story.
But yeah.
What's interesting also is it really is the last vestige of pre-spoiler culture. You went into The Matrix really not knowing anything. I don't know if you really knew that all this was an illusion and that they were really, was a post-apocalyptic movie. I don't recall. It's a long time ago.
I didn't know a thing about it.
This was before, I think it was still AOL
commercials.
Yeah, exactly.
It was still the ages of AOL dial-up.
Yeah.
The trailers didn't give away the whole movie.
Ain't It Cool was around.
Right.
This was like the early days of that.
But you didn't go into it where a million websites and shows and things had been talking about, there's a great new movie called The Matrix, and they're living in a fake world, and Keanu Reeves is actually has to defeat the machines by going back into reality with Joey Pants. It's like so.
It's hard to understate the importance of this film. We touched on it a little bit earlier. It was like the modern Star Wars, in Star Wars blended all of these pre-existing genres in a fresh new way that was exhilarating, and The Matrix did the same thing, as you mentioned, and it also spawned imitators that could not even come close.
In
even
film,
sequel, the
in
same
television,
filmmakers
in
couldn't
comics,
do it.
yeah.
It's
There were so
influence
many
was so
fucking
profound.
It
I
was
use the F word,
also-
but black trench coats
Yeah.
that showed up in movies and TV for years afterwards.
It was also a movie that a trilogy, with Star Wars, in the sense that if Star Wars had 2 sequels that were both Phantom Menace, it would be The Matrix.
Right.
Sadly, they didn't have their Empire Strikes Back, where they were able to take what they built in the Matrix and build on it. Instead, both those sequels are so flawed and
they have moments of awesomeness in
Yeah.
them.
I think Reloaded is certainly far superior to Revolutions,
Yes.
which I just think is just unwatchable and insane. But
You just don't like raves.
pretty much, my friend.
That's really what we're getting at. Here.
Yeah, I'm against dancing. So when we talk about
Yeah.
this on Footloose Week,
That's right.
Well, it would have to be Dancing Week, right?
Yeah.
Well, the
Dirty
Matrix-
Dancing, Footloose.
The Matrix is
Singing in the rain.
a great pick for Thursday, which puts me in a quandary for Friday.
You have 15 films
50
that
years.
you're choosing from.
Look, I'm just going to throw out some suggestions, and then we can land on where we want. Look, certainly high on my list would be the Omega Man. Again, Charlton Heston in a post-apocalyptic world where he's fighting basically vampires, zombies, whatever you want to look at it. Great score by Ron Grainer, but it's a little goofy. Obviously 12 Monkeys, Terry Gilliam's film is terrific post-apocalyptic film. Sean Connery and Zardoz, not so much. More recently, Children of Men is a
I was going to say, I
fantastic-
rewatched Children of Men the other day, and
God
I
damn
hadn't
it.
seen it in years. Terrific movie.
But there are also some very goofy takes on post-apocalyptic Tank Girl, which I really liked when I
Yep.
saw it, and is a lot of fun. Rachel Talalay's film, and has the best cover ever of Cole Porter's "Let's Fall in Love" by Joan Jett. Love that. Night of the Comet,
Right.
So
because
because we're all big Catherine Mary Stewart fans here, and of course in that Comet comes and the world is taken over by zombies, but Catherine Mary Stewart is able to prevail by spending a lot of time in shopping malls. So a very 80s movie, but delightfully entertaining. Damnation Alley, 1977. It was the film that
Right.
Fox expected to be their huge hit that year. It had a really cool truck, so that counts for something. Has a scene of killer cockroaches. Something to consider. Then, of course, if we go back a little, When Worlds Collide is a great post-apocalyptic film. It was some really, at the time, state-of-the-art special effects. It was the original kind of disaster Earth in Peril film that, predates the Day After Tomorrow and stuff like that by many years. But, for me, it comes down to two titles. Sleeper. Also, Woody Allen wakes up in Miles Monroe wakes up in the future.
Big surprise there coming from Mr. Altman.
And has to, destroy the leader, the Nose, who they're going to clone. But it comes down to two films for me. One we mentioned earlier, Michael Anderson's Logan's Run, a different 23rd century than was being depicted in Star Trek, and probably the most misunderstood, underappreciated post-apocalyptic movie of all time, which I'm a big fan of. And given the fact that Tom Petty died this year, I think it's only appropriate to honor the Postman.
Postman.
Can I hear an amen, brother?
Yeah.
Il
Apparently not.
Postino. No, the other one.
So I'm really
You could do a
where I
whole
thought
week
you were
on
going.
Kevin Costner post-apocalyptic.
Well,
movies.
it's
Yeah,
Waterworld,
Waterworld,
yeah. And to me, like 28 Days Later, Danny Boyle's film is brilliant, but I feel it's more a zombie
Well,
movie.
the great
than
thing
it's
about The Postman
post-apocalyptic.
is that it has 83% less urine drinking than the Waterworld does.
Well, let's not forget a film that is both a pre- and post-apocalyptic film, The Terminator.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, you're right.
Terminator 2.
How that? You know what? Yeah.
Well, Steve. Well played, sir.
Sneaking
Well
in
played.
there at the last minute.
Aren't you sneaky?
Boy, The Terminator is an interesting choice.
I mean, most people would probably consider that a time travel film, and
But
maybe
it
we say it for
is
time travel. But it is
legitimately post-apocalypse, just like Dawn of the Dead would be legitimately
Yes.
post-apocalypse. It's just what do we think is the controlling value?
I just wanna say-
Well, two of the three characters are in the post-apocalypse. It's just one character that has not yet quite made it.
I just want to
across
say
the line.
that The Terminator was such a good movie. I saw it in college that there were rats on the theater going past my foot, and I did not leave. I stayed because I was so into the movie. I just put my feet up and watched the rest of the movie. Freaking Boston, man.
When Ashley was giving his preamble to The Matrix, I thought you were going to say The Terminator because I had the same experience seeing that film in 1984, going into it knowing nothing about it other than it starred the muscle man from Conan, and that is had this goofy title, The Terminator. It's about a sci-fi robot. I'm like, oh, this is going to be ridiculous. And like within 5 minutes, I'm like, this movie is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, strictly, you know, most of us on this panel are writers. I mean, just looking at that movie from a narrative perspective, the perfection. I mean, Matrix is another one that falls into that realm. You know, the narrative perfection of the Terminator in terms of every syllable in that movie serving to move the story forward, to reveal information, to reveal character. I mean, I probably end up watching the Terminator once a year just because it still infuriates me how good it is and how cheaply it was made.
So lean and mean.
It's so lean and mean. And the first time you look up at that movie, you're 45 minutes into it. It's just it doesn't. It's just relentless. It doesn't stop moving, and it never stops. But just in terms of
absolutely, positively will not stop.
That's the whole point of the movie.
Yeah. The credits
And if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then this movie should be very flattered because this movie was knocked off and imitated for decades afterwards.
Still is.
Yeah, still is. There's one other film we missed, and given how brutal we were to the Oscar a few weeks back, I'd have to say Harlan Ellison's A Boy and His Dog.
We can actually, no, it's actually not bad.
Is a interesting.
Yeah,
not only is a
good.
tribute
Again,
to
Jason Robards.
Harlan, but underseen. Shout Factory put out a wonderful Blu-ray of this recently, or it's probably a year or two ago, and it's a terrific little film written by Harlan. L.Q. Jones directed it, and it's a great little sci-fi
Johnson.
movie.
Don Johnson, you may remember him from
Nashbury?
nothing, but yeah, he's amazing. And again, Jason Robards as the leader of the underground people.
It's better than the Oscar.
Well, it's different than the Oscar. It doesn't have as many laughs as the Oscar does.
No, it doesn't. Well, look, honestly, I'm going to cede my pick because traditionally the Friday is a group effort, but because we have a guest, we don't have that slot. I'm leaning towards the Terminator, frankly. I think that's an excellent suggestion.
I think that the Terminator is an excellent way to end the week because, Jim Cameron was a stickler for the details and all the wonderful actions and the things like that. And he would tell me, Arnold, don't look at the camera. And so I didn't eventually. And it was marvelous. It was just wonderful. And I was a robot, and it was great.
So Sean Connery doesn't think we should put Zardos on the list.
I would hope that no one ever saw that freaking movie again. It's the red diapers I was forced to wear are really atrocious.
There was a guy at San Diego Comic Con this year
a Linda
dressed as
Hamilton impression,
Zardos.
don't you?
He needs the wig, though.
He needs the wig. I'm surprised that 12 Monkeys isn't getting more love because I know you're Gilliam fans. I'm not a huge fan of that movie.
I like it, but I don't love it.
Yeah, that's
It's
how I
a better
feel.
idea than it is a movie.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't. Yeah. I'm surprised.
Brazil could be a great
Brazil.
entry.
Oh.
Dystopia for sure. Yeah.
But not post-apocalyptic
Apocalypse.
as much as it's dystopian.
I mean, there's
It's a bureaucratic apocalypse.
yeah.
There
That's
is Oblivion, the Tom Cruise
which
picture.
I like.
I liked it too.
I
don't
like
love
it.
I wouldn't swap it out for any of the films we.
I mean,
talked
do we
about.
revisit Logan's Run or
Personally, I obviously have a very sentimental connection to the Terminator. I mean, Sarah Connor Chronicles was one of the best creative experiences of my career. I loved working on that show. I loved working in that universe. That meant a great deal to me. So,
And yet you didn't pick Terminator for your movie.
I didn't pick Terminator because I didn't make the connection that Steve so brilliantly made. But I'm happy with picking The Matrix. I think it 100%
agree.
belongs
It's
on this
terrific.
list.
Absolutely.
But yeah, of what we've kind of talked about otherwise for Friday.
And I personally prefer the original Terminator to the
Absolutely.
sequel.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay.
We have a week.
We have a week. So
Terminate your week.
Monday, post-apocalypse week begins with The Road Warrior. Tuesday, Blade Runner, the final cut. Wednesday, Planet of the Apes. Thursday, The Matrix. And Friday, The Terminator. What a great week.
What an awesome week.
This is a really fantastic week. I want to send special thanks to Ryan Condell for joining us this week. You can follow him on social media at The Wrath of Condell.
Just Wrath.
just Wrath.
Yeah, Wrath
No,
of
the
Condell.
Vengeance of Condell.
Yeah.
Previously, now it's
That's
Wrath of Condell.
Conquest of
You
Condell.
can follow
Battle for
Stephen Melching
Yeah.
at Stephen
from
Melching,
Condell.
Darren Doctorman at Darren Doc, and of course Ashley E. Miller at Ashmaster Zero. And to follow the 430 Movie Podcast, you can go to Twitter and hit follow. We're also on Facebook. And I think you can follow us now on YouTube as well. Please, if you like this podcast, go on Apple Podcasts, rate 5 stars. And
If you don't.
you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Mark A. Altman. We have Lore coming out on Amazon. It's out on Amazon, so check that out from Ashley Miller and the multi-talented Sean Crouch. Steve Melching, Star Wars Resistance. And Darren has created some fantastic new logo wear at the 430 Movie Shop, which is at 430movie.com. And, of course, my new book, So Say We All, is available wherever books are sold. So a big thank you to Electric Studios and to Bill Ritter here at Electric for once again making this all possible. And we look forward to seeing you with an all-new episode of the 430 Movie next week.